Welcome back, everyone. Today it's going to be a really interesting one. So, the Overwatch League is dead, but their team have got something new. Apparently, it will be a more approachable, less expensive way of keeping esports interesting. And to be honest, that bit actually sounds kind of good, but it's happening in the backdrop of leaked information on where Overwatch's revenue actually seems to be right now. So then we gotta wonder, is this course correction? Is this consolidation and cost cutting? But this is happening amidst layoffs that have surprisingly impacted the Overwatch 2 development team far more than we initially assumed or than Microsoft initially led on. But then content creators have also gotten their first peek at the future of the game itself, and the outlook is, at least per their vague posting, not good. There's a massive balance overhaul to the whole game that is being touted effectively as Overwatch 3 for the next season. But then there are leaked patch notes, and those certainly don't paint a positive direction, at least in the eyes of some. It's honestly pretty spicy, and I've got to be real with you, I don't envy Aaron Keller's job right now. That, at the very least, must be stupidly stressful. Now, I'm going to be level with you. Right now, we have a bit of a problem. Currently, we're getting $2.50 per 1,000 views, which does mean that actually a lot of our content in this channel is made below cost. That's because we do put a lot of time into research. So if you would like to support us, then checking out bellular.ghost.io is the best way to do that. And over there, well, we've got exclusive content. We've got loading screen that we publish every single day. You'll get access to our news reports, both in written form way before I see them, and the actual videos before they hit YouTube, as well as other things like the exclusive members lounge where we hang out and talk about the news. So if you want to support our team and help me essentially chart a sustainable path forward, I would deeply appreciate it if you considered giving it a look. Okay, basically, Bobby Kotick's big NFL but the gamers, that is dead. And we really felt it was dead when, rather unceremoniously, the Overwatch League Twitter account just got deleted. Of course, this is something that makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to relitigate the entire thing, but basically, it was an NFL-style franchise model. If you wanted to compete, you'd have to purchase a team franchise, and I believe you were looking at like 20, 30, whatever million. And of course, the backstory here is something that any of us could have seen years ago. The team owners did not make their money back. This basically led to a big discussion with ABK about like, okay, what do we do? Do we stop after this period of time? And that actually involved basically Activision Blizzard saying, okay, we're waiving a bunch of fees. They actually lost, we believe, like hundreds of millions of dollars in that, which is a pretty crazy situation. Now, though, they are doing Overwatch Champions. They say their goal is to offer and cultivate an esports ecosystem that is more open. Basically, there are more online systems now. They're even working with Scholastic for school and college teams, and it's being ran by the COD League organizer Faceit. Now, Faceit do esports tools for many different games like LoL, Counter-Strike 2, Rocket League. They're owned by the Savvy Games Group. They are fascinating. Number one, they're basically owned by a Saudi Arabian public investment fund. Now, they're everywhere. They're in a lot of esports, actually. That's led to numerous dramas, but another drama, of course, is the Embracer Group. They were partway through a deal with Embracer Group that I think would have been something like $2 billion. It would have been a really massive amount of money, right? But literally the night before stuff was going to like go down and they were going to do their earnings call, they pulled out. Right, Savvy Games pulled out, and that's actually the prime reason why you're seeing so many of these layoffs right now from Embracer Group-owned studios. It is, in fact, kind of downstream of the Savvy Games Group. Think about how many games are not going to be made. Think about all of that. And what do you got to blame? In a way, a public investment fund. Now, the taking over of Faceit and all this stuff, I believe, happened in 2022. And the main thing you probably know of is ESL, which is owned by them. So basically, that's how it's going to be ran. You're going to have online tournaments, there's going to be physical ones in different places around the world. And to be honest, it basically reminds me more of what we had with something like StarCraft 2. And I've got to be real with you, I think this is far better than what they were doing previously, where you don't need to be some bigwig with a stupid amount of money buying a franchise to actually get properly in. And we literally know that in the early days of the Overwatch League, Blizzard pretty much killed a bunch of grassroots things. This is what they should have been doing from the beginning. Of course, what actually happened is Bobby Kotick had these big ideas about the NFL of gaming, and they tried to make that happen. And in doing so, they basically ran a completely unsustainable business that lost money and messed up jobs for many people. So, GG, now they're actually doing what they basically should have always been doing. Okay, let's move on to the next part then, and this is leaked financials. You guys know I love this kind of thing. And essentially, people talking about stuff on LinkedIn is a really common way, number one, to see who is literally completely batshit, because I don't know what it is about LinkedIn, but the most psychotic stuff ever ends up on there. But also, yeah, people want to boast their amazing KPIs, and sometimes leaks happen. Now, to dive into it, some of these things don't really matter, like, sorry, dude, I don't care that you went past your KPIs, though grats, I suppose. But the bit that matters here for us, over 50 million active users and $225 million of revenue. And most importantly, of course, this individual won a Silver Clio Award. I suppose that's probably the Game Awards of the marketing world. Who the hell knows? So, we've learned that. What we can do is think about some of the times here and then compare that with the numbers that Blizzard themselves have reported. So this guy, Sam Saliba, left the company in March 2023. Therefore, we're assuming that the numbers he's talking about are up until that point. And that would mean that from the launch, which is 4th of October 2022, to then, which is around 6 months, well, that's where this $225 million was generated. Now, a lot of what he's talking about with KPIs, that's probably his own marketing numbers. Some of those user numbers are just probably a snapshot of lifetime registrations at one point. As an example, we know that pre the Microsoft acquisition, Blizzard themselves had 26 million monthly active users. What matters, though, is that $225 million of revenue. That's for Overwatch 2 alone, and that's really worth thinking about. So, what do we know? Well, they reported in the first 3 months $100 million of in-game net bookings. That basically just means microtransactions. Well, you know, it's Overwatch 2. They're hardly micro. Right, 100 million, first 3 months, they said that was a strong start. Seemingly then, that reached $225 million by the time that our fellow here leaves, which is March 2023. So looking at that, you probably think, they're actually doing fairly well. Not so. Let's continue. By July, actually, the quarterly report that time said that, quote, engagement and player investment in Overwatch 2 declined substantially in the quarter. Now, that's the bit that's fascinating. So they had a strong first 3 months. They actually had a strong second 3 months. But then things began to tail off. And certainly when I think about my interest in Overwatch 2 and a lot of just what people were talking about, that does broadly track. This is something that I can then pull into Google Trends. Now look, I'm not sitting here saying this is amazing, perfect research, but you do see actually earlier in that quarter, that's when we're getting our stronger numbers. They then say in the second quarter, things decline. And at least in terms of that search interest, you actually do seem similar. But of course, you do have the seasonal, launch there in August, kicking things up again. And funny enough, this peak corresponds with the launch of Invasion, which is their PvE. After that, then, there's some Diablo events and stuff, like being able to purchase, I think it was Lilith. I imagine that would have driven their revenue up a little bit, but at least you can see here the interest over time for the game is not doing fantastic. I mean, we're looking here at, 26, 27, as opposed to our baseline of 100, which is, I think, in and around the start of a previous season early that year. So that is actually looking fairly rough for Overwatch 2. Thing is, though, it's looking rough in a direction that explains the behavior that the company went on to display. Okay, the PvE stuff was quite heavily monetized, as we all remember. After that point, well, we actually saw between the whole drama with Lilith and all of those things, where I believe to get Lilith, you had to purchase a $40 bundle. You can basically see that in the face of declining interest, and as they said here, a substantial quarter-over-quarter decrease in their in-game net bookings, you can basically see, we got less people, what are we going to do? Yank the prices up a little bit and squeeze just that little bit harder, which, is what a company's going to do, right? It's there to make money. Let's compare to Overwatch 1 then. So, Overwatch 1 made $1.3 billion in its first year, which is a lot of dollars. Now, that was it being a boxed product. In terms of microtransaction revenue alone, it took 3 years to reach $1 billion of microtransactions. So if you were to take their initial rate of $100 million for a quarter, it is actually earning less, like per unit of time than Overwatch 1 was, but in microtransaction revenue alone, and I'm so glad we have this stat, it took 3 years for Overwatch 1 to reach $1 billion. Now, if Overwatch 2 had have sort of kept on its course for about $200 million every 6 months, it would have managed $1 billion in 2.5 years, which is in fact a little bit better. And that does make sense. The game does feel more heavily monetized, but I do sort of think a lot of the very, very core Overwatch fan base, they've kind of since moved on. I know a fair few of them, and they have basically zero interest in playing Overwatch right now. A lot of them being profoundly disappointed in the rescoping of Overwatch 2. That just meant they don't give a damn about the franchise. So now what is the game that is, you know, all of the, if I do a little internet joke to say that all the Zoomers and the e-boys and the e-girls are playing, it's not Overwatch, it's Valorant. So yeah, they got their lunch money taken by Riot. Overall then, fairly brutal. If they had have maintained that audience, but then had the deep monetization they've got now, I really do imagine they'd be making a lot more money. Overall then, is Overwatch in massive existential financial trouble? No. It has certainly, though, went from being very successful to a bit less successful. We will have to see if they can salvage it. Speaking of that, though, we got to talk about the layoffs. Now, these obviously suck, and they suck on a human level because, yes, we can talk about, you know, we're consumers, we are here for the product, but that product is made by people. If those people are not treated well, the product generally won't be as good. And that's something that really plays out in the long run. And for the people who remain, there's going to be a lot of just stress. They won't be feeling happy, and that's not good, especially when you're running a live service, which is a notoriously grueling thing to do. So, on the layoffs, well, we had this from Lucas here, who said, what a demonetization update. Half the environment art team cut from Overwatch 2. Folks, I helped hire and train associate through senior levels looking for work if your teams have got openings. Here then is a senior concept artist explaining that they've seen their department be gutted. So that is quite, well, it's quite worrying. What does it let us know? Well, it lets us know that the environment team is being cut. That likely means they'll be producing less environments. Or they'll be outsourcing, one of the two, I suppose. And it also seems narrative has been impacted. Here's Gavin, who is a lead narrative designer, saying that he's been laid off. So overall, when you look at all of this, you know, what do we sort of think? Well, I think it's actually fairly clear. They're making the game cheaper to run because they're likely trying to optimize optimize the unit economics, right? If you can cut your costs by half, and have a minimal impact on your revenue, congratulations, you're magically twice as profitable. Okay, not literally, but you get my point. And in addition to that, there is opportunity cost, and then there's also organizational focus. The more things you try to do, generally speaking, the less well you do them, so that's why they're likely trying to make this team more lean and more focused. If I was an investor, maybe I'd be happy for the immediate financial prospects, but certainly, that is not the case here. As people who want to play the Overwatch world, this is a massive loss. This is a very mercenary decision, and that's essentially that. So if you value that PvE stuff, well, I mean, unfortunately, bad news. I think this does just mean that Overwatch is going to be more relegated to just being what it is. Maybe we will see more stuff in the Overwatch IP in the future, though. Maybe they'll try to approach PvE just from a new game. To be honest, maybe that would be a sensible thing, but if they were doing that, surely they would have wanted to retain all that talent who knows the Overwatch art style. Next then, we got to talk about the leaks. These leaks are bloody insane, right? That's just how I'll put it. Of course, previously there was a bit of a PR mess up by Aaron Keller. He, I think, rather excitedly jumped the gun and announced a healing self-passive for everybody, but without the full context of all the other game changes. And he said, look, sorry, I didn't mean to spook you guys. This, it should be taken in the context of a lot of other changes. So he apologizes. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely fair. But unfortunately for Aaron, well, it does seem we actually know more of what's up now, and absolutely not in the way that he would have preferred. Rather unfortunate, but look, it has happened, so we need to talk about it. We're a couple of weeks away from this new season, and that means that the press and influencers are being briefed. Like sometimes influencers will see, a movie, and then they'll be able to vague tweet about it. That's a little bit of what's happened here. But what's also happened is leaks. These are unverified leaks, mind you, but they're being talked about. They represent fundamentally a total change in how Overwatch 2 is going to be played. This is not what Aaron Keller wanted, because right now we have a list of changes. We don't have the design intent. We don't have them talking about internal playtesting and how it changed the game. We just have something to be worried about. Here's a summary. Projectiles are vastly revamped. Hit scan weapons are more powerful. Travel time projectiles are actually faster, and projectile sizes are all going up, which certainly is them, I think, trying to both raise the skill floor and maybe pull the skill ceiling down a little bit, then I suppose actually just making it a bit more mobile-like. And of course, along with that, everyone's health pool has been increased by about 15 to 20% to compensate for that prior stuff. Then the self-healing passive is there. Most ultimate costs are being increased by around 10%, and most characters are getting increases to their damage abilities in either damage or a faster cooldown or both. So essentially, everyone is getting much harder to kill, and yes, they have their passive self-heal. Everyone, though, is getting a slight buff to their damage and their ability to hit in order for, the game to have impact. So I think what this is basically aimed at doing is making the game a little bit more brawly, and then moving it away from DPS being a sort of a one-shot kill. Do you remember, I think it was Seagull, a pro player who had this amazing Hanzo and Widowmaker footage? I think it's moving away from that to now being more of a brawl, but where the role of DPS is in securing kills. So I suppose they're just trying to rebalance that a little bit. And to go to the opinion of somebody who just has more experience with Overwatch than me, here's Green Pig saying, regardless of the leaks, there was a streamer or pro player who said this is basically Overwatch 3, and to that he was completely right. It is arguably even bigger than the shift to 5v5, a fundamental change in how the game is played. Firing up in the Reddit is just this comment here. There's so many changes, I have zero idea how this will play without me actually playing it. That is also my own opinion. Personally, I've said this before, I think Overwatch 2 is an absolutely magnificent game. I think it's really, really fun. I love how that engine feels, and yeah, certainly I have a brilliant time watching it. And every time I watch a video from Optimum, a really, really great YouTuber, by the way, I see his Overwatch B-roll and think, good God, I aspire to be like that at a video game. So I love it. That being said, I don't engage with it as a product, and I think it's a great game, but a bad product, and a game itself that is great, but does have issues, oversights, that sort of thing, and I really, really hate its business model. I don't know how these changes will play out. Personally, I do sort of enjoy lethality, so we'll have to see. Maybe, though, with the hit scan radius being ever so slightly larger, maybe I will feel better than I actually am at the game. Wouldn't that be crazy? One thing a lot of players are saying, though, is, hey, experimental game? Testing where? And that's a really good thing to bring up. Though there are some inherent problems with a public test realm or something like the experiment there, where essentially people never really play an experimental thing or a test build or a PTR in the same way they would play on live, so the data you get from it's not exactly perfect. That being said, the PTR with a game like World of Warcraft, it can certainly help flag issues, so that is certainly a bright side. And I think this is a problem Blizzard are having in their live games, actually. So World of Warcraft is the one with the PTR cycle that gets a lot of testing done, and it definitely does help the game itself. Looking here with Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4, though, they don't have that instituted. And in yesterday's video, we talked about D4 having a really bad launch for Season 3, and then the team making, I would say, borderline just heroic levels of getting fixes out, because they literally posted them on Friday night. So a few days later, those fixes come up. The thing is, though, a lot of people are saying, hey, if you had a PTR like you had for Diablo 3, we could have done all of this weeks ago, and there wouldn't have been stress. So that then is a little bit of a challenge. When you're doing the PTR, you don't have the control of information. It will change some things about how you sort of handle your development pipeline. And I think this is actually a weakness that will now disproportionately impact the Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 teams. Over in World of Warcraft, yes, it matters greatly that Blizzard have gutted QA. Well, to be more accurate, that Microsoft have instituted massive cuts, slaughtered QA and customer service. To these games that don't have a public test realm, I mean, that impact, the impact of outsourcing QA, is going to be felt far more substantially. Ultimately then, if these leaks are true, I will be very interested to see how the hell the game actually plays. I do hope ultimately that this game gets to be in a better state, because I think it is a brilliant game. It's one of those things. You can love the game, you can, wish the developers the best, you can still be very critical of the company and the management and the leadership of the company. That's the perspective that I take in these sorts of things. We'll have to see how it is. I'll certainly play it, actually. Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, hey, it's a big change in a game that I've played on and off since launch, so why the hell not, right? Okay, that's my take. Let me know what yours is. If you want to support our mission here, well, Bellular.ghost.io is the best way to do that. You'll also get, of course, a bunch of exclusive content and our Members Lounge Discord, which is a great place to hang out and chat. Okay, that's it for me. Watch this video next, and I'll see you over there.